Welcome back to another vlog. This is Star vs. the Forces of Evil, Season 2, Episode 11, Hungry Larry, and Spider with a Top Hat. This was a great pair of episodes. I really enjoyed them both. Hungry Larry was just a really effective, Halloween episode. Which is, I'm assuming, when this aired or thereabouts, though you never know. Those of you who follow me on YouTube, but not my blog or Patreon, may or may not know, but I write a lot about the DC Animated Universe. I've been doing this very long project, going through it episode by episode, and it habitually airs what are pretty obviously holiday episodes nowhere near the holiday in question. A Christmas episode in the summer, or a Father's Day episode in November, or that kind of thing. So who knows if this Halloween episode was actually at Halloween, but I'm going to assume it probably was, or thereabouts. Especially because the nature of it is such that it could have been placed almost anywhere in the series, so that would make sense. The two things I really like about it, I really like that Star and Janna are still hanging out. I like Janna's character. She's a lot of fun. And I like the friendship between her and Star. It's much more, to me, interesting and entertaining than the kind of generic, typical, outcast boys circle that Marco had last season, who those two guys seem to have evaporated this season. And I can't say I'm that upset about it. I don't feel like they were that interesting. Whereas Janna's a lot of fun. And her relationship with Star is a little bit different than the kind of stuff that you typically see. You don't typically see girls having the two weirdos whose weirdness plays off each other well. You don't see that as often. So that's cool to have. And it means we get things like, of course they would do a Bloody Mary type thing that actually works. Because they're Star and Janna. Janna's goth and a little witchy, and Star is straight up magic. They can summon things. Hungry Larry himself is great. I love the character design, how he starts out as this little bedsheet ghost with a businessman vibe. And you can see him setting out in the morning to go do a haunting with a briefcase and a hat. There's just that vibe to him, and it's perfect. I've been watching a lot of Adventure Time lately, during when I'm unwinding and stuff. I've been catching up on it, and he feels like a character that could come out of that, which is high praise, because Adventure Time does these really bizarre, really interesting one-off characters. And he feels on that level. This juxtaposition of things that don't normally go together. The ghost who's kind of nebbishy is not really a thing you see, and then combine that with the fact that he is legit scary later in the episode. Physical horror almost never bothers me, but the creepiness of the children disappearing and you can't see what's, Hungry Larry causing them to vanish. I keep wanting to call him Hungry Jack, which I think is a pancake. He's Hungry Larry. I got it. Yeah. But yeah, the way he keeps getting snatched up, or the children keep getting snatched up, and then of course the dad comes in and saves the day, because this was kind of an episode about him feeling bad about not being able to scare kids, and of course the kids think it's the greatest haunted house ever. But it is really cool. I also noticed, the vomiting up candy thing reminded me of the Halloween episode of Gravity Falls, which I think would have been a year before this aired, or 2 years before this aired. Somewhere around then. But that had a monster made of like the discarded Halloween candies that nobody likes. And there were some similar like visuals, like this idea of the excess of candy and how it's kind of grotesque. You know, that it's like the sheer glut of it is kind of disgusting. And of course that gets into like, you know, his, you know, being so small and the general shape of him, like, Hungry Larry is a little like those little Halloween buckets, which are normally like orange and have faces on them and they're supposed to be jack-o'-lanterns, but I'm pretty sure I've seen ones that were white and meant to be ghosts. And so he's kind of like little bucket for trick-or-treating. Which in turn then, him gathering the children and devouring them is, you know, very much like, oh, you know, you children devouring all your candy, now you're going to be devoured in turn. It's a very, you know, karmic, poetic justice kind of ghost thing that just fits well with horror in general. Because, you know, one of the major traits of horror, especially film horror, and especially film horror aimed at teens, is this kind of moralizing element. Slasher movies, the monster always goes after the bad kids, the ones who transgress boundaries, especially like sexually. You know, it's kind of a truism that in those kinds of movies, having sex is a death sentence. Because it's expressions of the teen anxieties about being, you know, bad, about stepping outside of boundaries, but of course pushing back your boundaries, which requires stepping outside of the old ones, is a necessary part of growing up. So it's, you know, and so the like little kid version of that would be eating too much candy, you know? And that's kind of what the monster, the ghost, is pointing at. And we get the same kind of thing with the dad. They just called him everybody in the episode called him either Mr. Diaz or Dad in Marco's case. So I can't remember his first name, but Mr. Diaz. He, of course, is dressed as a jack-o'-lantern, the more common candy bucket. And he becomes what he's actually, like, he is covered in candy and forces himself into the monster, and he's actually is too much for it, and it vomits everywhere. Like, it's actually very clever. So I enjoyed that a lot. And then the second part was really fun, too, but I was kind of on the end of it. Spider with a top hat. What I was like, there were two ways they could have gone with it. Because the whole, you know, first of all, I love the concept of, like, inside of Star's wand is this community where all of the, like, things she calls up in her spells all live. And they hang out with each other, and they train, and so on and so forth. And the spider with the top hat entertains them all. But, of course, they're mostly attack spells. That's most of what Star uses. And the attack spells, you know, they value Spider with a top hat. But the way in which they value him makes him feel lesser. He feels like he isn't on their level because he isn't an attack spell like they are. And there were really two ways this could have gone. It could have gone well, actually his entertainment is valuable in and of itself, and he doesn't need to be attack spell, or could have gone, well, through grit and determination, he gets his chance to prove himself, and is a good attack spell. And they went with the latter, and I honestly was hoping for the former. Like, up until the point at which all the attack spells are being thrown out at, Star's target, and they're all getting their, none of them are enough. At that point, it became clear that they were going to go with the second option, but up until that point, I was really hoping for the first, because I feel like there's this tendency to forget what we're here for, Life isn't about winning fights. If you have to fight, that's to maintain life, Like, we shouldn't exist for purposes of victory and glory and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's their, triumphing over enemies is not really the point. Like, that's something you do if necessary. It's something you do to create space within which to create, which is really what it's about, is connecting with other people, living your life, creating things, doing whatever it is that you feel, whatever work it is you feel called to do, spending time with other people, with loved ones, building relationships and connections and communities, and there's a bajillion different ways you can do it. You can, raise children, or raise flowers in a garden, or make cartoons, or write books, or dance and caper for the entertainment of others, or, any of a bajillion things you could do. You can make things that are useful for people. You can come up with ideas. You can, all these different things that, like, the only reason to fight is to create space for those things. It isn't the point. And I think sometimes we get caught up in it. And I think that's a dangerous road. I think that way lies nationalism and expansionism and imperialism and conquest. We lose sight of what's important and become fixated on crushing enemies. And Spider with a Top Hat, like, entertaining others and making them happy and revitalizing them and giving them something to wake up to that they enjoy, like, that's valuable. That's important. There's a point at which one of the creatures talks about, like, life or death stuff. And it's like, no, the violence is death stuff. What Spider with the Top Hat does is life stuff. So I was a little disappointed there, but it was still a really entertaining episode. And even though I would have preferred the other way, what they went with was still good, and I did really enjoy his hat, like, laser blasting everything, and the reveal that he's the strongest one, and so on. So, still really solid episode, overall. The 2 parts. Anyway, that's about it. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Check out my Patreon for early access to vlogs, essays, and more. And I will see you all next time. Bye!